But Cole Palmer doesn't have that capacity to overthink or overcomplicate the situation. The guy is a walking modern-day Buddha. He's so zen.
I tell you what, it's scuppered Martin Tyler's "You will never see anything like this" line from the Aguero. That's as close as it comes to repeating what City did. That ball hangs in the air for way too long for comfort. With that
Panenka.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 24, with myself, David, and Mr. Oliver Wilson, recording at 8:30 on a Monday morning. Is Ollie Wilson off to play an early round of golf? Is he commentating on something from China later on? I don't know, and I didn't ask, to be honest. Good morning, Ollie Wilson.
Yeah, we all know which the answer to that one is, but it's business related. All the activities today. There's a lot going on this
Corporate golf at 9 a.m. Is it, Ollie?
There's some big time schmoozing taking place with potential working areas and whatnot. So this is we've got that. And we've got a lot going on this week with a bit of Europa League and Championship coming up as well. So there's the prep time, there's the podcast time. It's all blurring into one. But it's a good run into Christmas. I love it, man. I'll put it that way.
Well, one of the good things about this job, I always think, is that like the work, everyone's always striving for work-life balance. But do you ever look at a week that's busy or not busy with work and think that's better or worse? Because I just think of it as like, it's just life, right? And the job and the podcast and everything we do is sort of merged into one thing. I don't know if that's a good thing, but there's no, I don't differentiate really between like, I'm working loads that week, I'm not working loads, therefore that week is good or bad. It's just all a bit of a joy.
Well,
I
think it's one of those
positive, Ollie.
I think it's one of those things where I look at a busy week and I find it easier to schedule everything if I know I've got a busy week coming up. So I'm more likely to do more things on a week where I've got more work. Whereas if I've got a week where there's maybe only one or two games, you're suddenly looking like a lot of days that don't have much on, but most of the time those are midweek days. So I get a bit like, well, what am I going to do on those midweek days? And then you kick a few things down the curb. And you're like, well, I'll do the house cleaning on this day, and it never happens and all that kind of stuff. Whereas if I have a busy week, I'm like, right, boom, pronto, let's do this. We've got these windows to do this, these windows to do this. We'll get to the gym at this time, we'll do that. There's nothing better than being busy as well. As a freelancer, taking pressure off your back, there's nothing better than being busy. Man.
Yeah, the 9 to 5 crew shaking their heads listening to this, Ollie. But we digress, and we will dive in to Not Another Sports Pod, episode 24. I messaged Ollie Wilson last night and said Cole Palmer will never miss a penalty. And Ollie said, why'd you say that? And I'm going to tell you why, Mr. Ollie Wilson, because there's two criterias to be a master penalty taker. One is the technique, obviously, which most footballers actually have, but Cole Palmer has in spades. The variation as well. We saw the Panenka against Tottenham yesterday. But the second thing is the mentality. Now, logically, you should never miss a penalty from 12 yards out, right? It's a dead ball situation. You can practice it all day long. The goalkeepers, especially these days, have to stay on their line. You should never miss a penalty. It's the external factors that make players miss penalties. But Cole Palmer doesn't have that capacity to overthink or overcomplicate the situation. The guy is a walking modern-day Buddha. He's so zen. And there's just so little thought process. And I say that in a very positive way because he's truly living in the moment in the way that everyone strives to in life. And that is the reason why Cole Palmer, I will put my neck on the line and say he will never, ever miss a Premier League penalty. He scored 12 from 12, Ollie. That's the best conversion rate in the history of the Premier League. Yaya Toure had scored 11 from 11. Harry Kane has scored 33, but he's also missed 4 in the process. So Cole Palmer, 12 from 12, best Premier League penalty taker by conversion rate of all time. There we go.
Yeah, I like that you added in the caveat of Premier League penalty, just to make sure that the England curse is still hanging on him for when it comes to any sort of major tournament, World Cup, European Championships, etc. Yeah, look, are we going to start calling him Senor Cole Palmer? Because it was very South American, that Panenka. Because that ball hangs in the air for way too long for comfort.
Proper
with that penalty.
Panenka, that.
Yeah. I mean, there is a point.
You know, you get some fake Panenkas these days, but that was a proper, exactly, you worded it perfectly. That was a Panenka that if the goalkeeper just waited like a split second, they literally could have stood there and caught it and laughed at Cole Palmer. It was a proper Panenka.
Well, I genuinely think there might be a point of Ben Foster Fraser Forster, Jesus Christ, Ben Foster's obviously well too long and gone. But if Fraser Forster is just a little quicker with himself, he could get up again and react back to that, because it is just hanging there for that extra second too long for my liking, for kind of comfort. But look, cool as you like Cole Palmer, I mean, you can't... The superlatives were running out of at this point with him, because after what he did coming off the bench in the Euros, after what he did obviously at the end of last season and the start of this season, he's continued this amazing run of form. And if you're talking about people that might be able to take away that spot of Jude Bellingham and the kind of number 10 role for England, that's really one of the only people. I'd hate to see him getting forced out wide for England and kind of doing the whole, how many people can we fit into a certain spot at a certain time, and how many players can we make sure we have in the starting 11.
That's obviously going to happen as well.
Yeah,
but
yeah, because it's going to be really tough to drop someone like Jude Bellingham from that role.
I think as well, Ollie, I mean, Cole Palmer's goal was great. I think only Haaland and Salah have scored more than him in the Premier League this season. But I mean, it's the goals and assists, isn't it? It's that dual threat. It's that, I'm not a goals contribution man, but goals contribution, like, it's a crazy amount of goals and assists. Chelsea in the Premier League title race or no? After beating Tottenham, 4 points off Liverpool.
Well, you have to say, with only being 4 points at the moment, yeah, they probably are. And if they can keep it going, yeah, I mean, why not? They're the only side that seem to be able to hang anywhere close to Liverpool right now in terms of the Premier League table. It's a great win over a Tottenham side that are struggling, I think, still for, not identity, because Ange Postecoglou has this identity. He wants to play... If he was winning games, you'd be calling him Jurgen Klopp 2.0. You know, rock and roll football, all out, attacking, goal scoring. This is great, but they can't defend well enough to be able to play that at the moment. So suddenly Ange Postecoglou is getting the wrath of the Tottenham supporters, and suddenly they want the big Australian out, calling him a fraud, which seems a bit harsh in my opinion. But who am I to argue with football supporters about their club?
I mean, Big Ange, what can you say about him? He doesn't want to defend, and he refuses to defend, and he kind of feels like it's beneath him. I think in midweek, Ollie, Ange Postecoglou goes up to the Tottenham fans, doesn't he, away at Bournemouth, and they're just lost, and he goes over to the Tottenham fans. And I've got to say, and I like the idea of Big Ange, I really do, but the minute you do that, not many Premier League managers recover from that. The minute you start biting back at your own fans, especially when you do not have a bank of success and trophies and trust, you're in a little bit of trouble. And do I think it's okay that fans hurl abuse at Ange Postecoglou? No, I do not. And do I think Postecoglou is probably within his right to go on and talk to them and say, what are you doing? I do, but I would be extremely careful if I were him about taking on that group of Tottenham fans who, by the way, that's the group that go away. That's away from home midweek. That's the group of fans that you really, really need to keep on side, because that's the real core of the travelling supporters. So I'd be extremely wary. Do I think he's a fraud? No, but I think his refusal to defend is hilarious and magical to watch as a neutral. He needs wins, and he needs them quickly. I would have thought, that they're better than 11th, which is where they currently are in the Premier League table.
Just take a look at teams that can defend and their position in the table comparatively as well. I mean, we've said it all season. You know, Forest have built a great success so far this season off their ability to defend. Now, scored 3 at Old Trafford against Manchester United. That's superb as well for Nuno Espirito Santo, but it's been the bread and butter of their success so far in this campaign has been the ability to defend. Liverpool, without a doubt, the best defence in the Premier League right now, top of the table, flying high. Can't get a game this weekend because Everton have got too dodgy a stadium, or a bit of a bottle job in that sense with the cancellation of the Merseyside derby this weekend.
We can talk about that a little bit if you want, Ollie.
I mean, we can.
It was postponed, Ollie, not because of the conditions inside the stadium, I believe, but safety concerns around the ground. Is that not just modern day society? Safety and security has to come first, because on weather alone it would have been played.
Well, look, I've seen obviously videos of people in the streets of Liverpool that early morning genuinely getting blown down the street with brutal winds that hit the UK as Storm Dara kind of clattered particularly the West Coast and South Wales and that area on the Saturday morning. But it's just quite damning that Wigan is 20 minutes down the road. They had a 12:30 kickoff against Lincoln City, I think it was, and against Leyton Orient, sorry, and that went ahead. And Wigan's Twitter feed was like, "No, we're still going." Like, what? Everybody's messaging.
More fans at the Merseyside derby, a little bit more on edge, maybe. No doubt this was a police decision as well as a club decision.
Well, it was reported on TalkSport in the morning that it was internal safety officers at the club that made the decision to cancel it. I don't see a benefit for either Liverpool or Everton in cancelling it, so I don't think it's been done over, let's not have that, just because...
I think it's a benefit for Liverpool.
Probably.
I don't think you want to play the last Merseyside derby ever in a storm.
But, that was going to say the thing for me would be Everton would probably want to play this in this sort of moment because the elements are a great leveller in terms of the ability to play football and there's nothing better than when, banging it down with rain and then a scrappier side is able to, particularly, one being led by someone like Sean Dyche, is able to kind of grind out a victory. So the only team that this hinders probably is Everton rather than anybody else. So I don't think it was done with any idea of, let's not play and then we can move it further down the line when it's more beneficial to us or anything like that. I just found it a bit sad, to be honest, and they're very lucky, obviously, that they're so close. It's a Merseyside derby, so there's no away fans travelling. There were a number of games that were called off quite late. I think Barrow and MK Dons was called off that morning, but definitely there will have been MK Don fans, the few of them that will travel away, will have started their journeys or preparations to go up that Saturday morning. It's like you knew the storm was coming. You knew whether the ground and the facilities were going to be fit for purpose. It's not necessarily waterlogged pitch that's the problem. It's the wind, the rain, the elements, but you knew that the wind in particular was going to be that blowing that strong. It's been reported that the storm diary was going to be bad, so you had to call it off, I think, earlier than a lot of the grounds did. But I just think it looked pretty poor, and I threw a line into my Sky Bet Championship commentary on the 12:30 of where the Premier League falters the Sky Bet Championship provides in the early kickoffs this Saturday. Because it's like, it does seem to sum up the top end. Well, we want everything to be pretty, nice.
Game's gone.
Sanitary, all that. And then down in the Championship, it's like, wind and rain, forget it. We're still playing. Come on. And I kind of loved it. And it was a great leveller across the board in a number of places on the weekend. And football's losing that to an extent. Now, again, I will say it's all about safety. If there was actually a real danger of fans and supporters getting seriously hurt, whether Goodison is actually a ground that a lot of people were kind of estimating that Goodison was going to struggle as a ground in these conditions, maybe the fear of something coming off a roof or anything like that, particularly as when you're moving ground, the ability to keep it.
You don't want to get sued.
Yeah, 100%.
But I think this is a nice games gone section of the podcast. Can I give you my games gone of the last week?
100%.
Jack Stevens gets sent off for pulling Mark Cucurella's hair. It's just midweek. I don't know whether you've seen this, Ollie, but if you haven't seen this, because it might have slipped by because Chelsea went to Southampton and battered them midweek in that midweek round of fixtures. And basically, Jack Stevens, a Southampton captain, when I say pull someone's hair, I mean he with his index finger and thumb, literally pull Cucurella's hair a tiny bit. Cucurella is a professional athlete in his physical prime. The fact he hit the deck from that is so funny. It's unbelievable. Anyway, it's in the rules. You cannot pull someone's hair. You get sent off. So Jack Stevens is an idiot because he hasn't read the rule book or hasn't been told that. But at the same time, it goes down as violent conduct. I'm sorry, that's not violent. It's really annoying and it shouldn't happen. And if the ref sees it, it's a yellow or maybe retrospectively something happens. But that, he literally just pinches Cucurella's hair. Gets sent off, which I just thought was an absolute game's gone. Considering as well, Moises Caicedo yesterday goes in a yard off the ground on, I can't remember who it was, on a Tottenham player's above his ankle and stayed on the pitch.
Yeah, that was wild. Words of violence as well now, though, Dave. So I mean, you got to be careful with what you say these days. Sometimes
don't lock me up, Starmer.
The other thing I want to suggest is football players aren't allowed to change boots during a game, because we saw Cucurella have the 2 slips because he was wearing studs. I'm pretty sure they weren't molded and they weren't kind of too low studs or anything, too short studs or anything like that. He was wearing studs on those white pair of boots that he initially had, and then he's put on another pair of boots that I think they looked like they were more rugby studs,
and he blames the kit man, by the way.
Yeah. This is your own decision. You were out there in warm-ups, you got a good idea of the level of footing that you've got on that playing surface, and I think if you are foolish enough not to be able to make the correct decision for your footwear and take the correct safety, how much is the extra length on that second pair of boot studs affecting Mark Cucurella that he goes, I can't wear those. I'll lose that pace. I'll lose that touch, that control.
Mate, when he runs off and he's like shouting at the kit man and being like, well, what can I do about it? Oh, why have you given me these boots? It's like, mate, you are a sentient human being. You put those boots on. As Ollie said, you were in the warm-up. You know what the conditions are. You've opted to pick those boots because you slipped twice in the first 20 minutes or whatever. You've then decided you can't. Yeah, absurd. And I completely agree with you. Once you cannot change your boots within the first half, I think is a cracking rule. And if you're a goalkeeper, you shouldn't be allowed to get a cap brought on either. Like if you suddenly realise it's sunny.
You're only allowed to change attire and stuff like that in the dressing room. It cannot happen on the side of a pitch. So you can do it at half time, but you can't do it going into extra time in, say, a second half, unless weather conditions change enough during the game. So if you're...
Nah, not even that. Because that's open to interpretation. And
that's true. Yeah, that is true. But that makes it interesting if you've got like a dry game that suddenly there's a monsoon-esque downpour, so to speak, and everybody's there in their short studs and can't freaking handle the conditions at all in the second half or extra time or something. But that's so rare anyway that, we just won't bother with that. Yeah.
Marc Cucurella, what a character though. I mean, after that banger hit that he had in the summer after winning the Euros, Cucurella, which is my campus version of it. I just think he's obviously like just this mad character. I mean, the way he went down, as I say, getting his hair tugged, then he sort of slips a couple of times. He's a really good left back, by the way. Really good left back, I think. Quality footballer. And then Enzo Maresca. He's obviously making a joke, Enzo Maresca, because they've won the game and they're doing great this season, Chelsea. But he was asked about the title race, and he said, no, we're not going to slip up like Cucurella. And we talk about throwing your own player under the bus for a gag. Like, I thought it was quite a punchy chat. Actually really funny.
Footballers are very kind of precious, and there's a lot, particularly in post-match interviews and stuff, that kind of, don't say anything too mean or too harsh, or don't keep it straight edge, just bat every question away, generic answer. So the fact that Enzo Maresca's kind of had this dig at his own player, it's obviously easier after you've won the game and everything. But I'm a huge fan of that. Of, hey, look, we appreciate there was mistakes made. They were almost very freaking costly, considering they led to both the two early Tottenham goals. But we got through it. So at least smile about it for once. Because there's not enough of that in modern day football, and particularly with the kind of brand image conscious players not wanting to look foolish at all. I like the idea of it being like, you're a bit of a dick, but it's all right. We got the victory. We're okay with it now. Don't let it happen again. Wear the correct boots.
Elsewhere in the Premier League, a few things I want to rattle through, Ollie. That's a bad result for Arsenal. Because you would have thought Liverpool not playing this weekend, what a great chance for Arsenal. If you're going to win the league, you go away at Fulham and you win and you close that gap to 4 points. So to keep it at, whatever it is now, 6 points and Liverpool with the game in hand, I think that's a bad result for Arsenal. Arsenal, the set-piece machine.
I'm not a fan of AI, but there's a couple of good pictures of Mikel Arteta's face being moulded onto a Tony Pulis body with all these set-piece discussions around Arsenal, which is just excellent. Sometimes the internet does win.
It's such a clever dig, that, because Mikel Arteta and Arsenal obviously aren't Stoke City. Like, no one really thinks they are. Like, this is a quality Arsenal side that should have won trophies already and hasn't. But just that little, like, nice little Stoke, who, this kind of struggling, plucky, lower Premier League side that survived mainly because of their, set pieces and can you do it on a cold Tuesday night in Stoke? So I just think that little comparison is real classic British humour. It's just a little bit naughty, really, isn't it? Especially asking Arteta directly.
I find it funny as well, though, how quickly, a couple of games and the narrative changes from being, wow, aren't Arsenal great at these set pieces? That is an awesome tool to have in the Arsenal, to Arsenal are only sodding set pieces. What a disgrace. It's like,
that's
7 days.
Football, though, isn't it?
What are we doing here? This is still a really good Arsenal side that played good football. They just weren't able to break down Fulham enough to be able to find that second goal. They're by far the better side for the majority of that game. I was kind of flicking between that and the Sheffield United game as well on the weekend, and then obviously you had the Chelsea game later on. But yeah, I'd hate to be a football manager. I'd hate to do this because in this country it's absolutely brutal. Amorim
is it not every country, mate? It's not like Spain, Italy, Brazil. These countries have
they're not
massive...
nice, I suppose. But I think in Spain you can probably get away with being a mid-table manager at like a Betis or Sevilla, and you can go under the radar for a couple of seasons before the wolf's at the door, so to speak. I'm not sure about Serie A. I think the Italian press are pretty brutal as well. So the pink pages of the Gazzetta dello Sport will certainly hang you out to dry if you're struggling at any club. And what a wild table that is at the moment, with Juve and Milan not even close to the kind of top of the table picture. Atalanta.
I was going to ask you, Ollie, talk to us about Atalanta. Those that don't follow Italian football, they know Ollie Wilson absolutely loves it. And talk to me about Atalanta and the Serie A title race, because outside looking in, it looks very exciting.
So Atalanta is one of the best stories in modern-day football. There was an article maybe a couple of years ago that was saying there are only 3 sides in the top tier of Italian football that run at a profit, and Atalanta was one of those sides, which I think you just have to respect more than anything else, a club being well-run and well-managed across the board from front office to front of the pitch. And Gianpiero Gasperini has come in many, many years ago and just built a system of knowing who he needs to bring in, what he needs to bring in to replace departing players who inevitably get sold for a lot of money because they improve their status at Atalanta. And they've had this like rotating conveyor belt of one out the door, next one comes in, we get better somehow, which is an almost impossible task to do in this level of football. So you have a club that's well run, a club that's superbly managed in terms of the player personnel, who have slowly and steadily become kind of semi-regulars for Champions League spots, Europa League spots, etc. When, 15 years ago, this is an Atalanta side that you would imagine to be flirting with danger down at the bottom of the Serie A, maybe in Serie B for a season before hopping back up, kind of in that like Hellas Verona, Chievo sort of ranks. Although that may be a bit of a disservice actually to Atalanta. And now they find themselves 2 points clear at the top of the table with Napoli on their heels. Inter have a game in hand, but are 3 points off Atalanta as well. And it's just staggeringly impressive. I mean, you've got a top 7 right now in Serie A that goes from 7th to 1st. Milan, Juve, Lazio, Fiorentina, Inter, Napoli, Atalanta. So you don't have Roma up there at all yet. But that is probably 7 of the biggest names in Italian football. And it's weird to see La Dea is ahead of all of them. And it's just, I think, it's the model that football clubs should take, of patience, of trust in a manager. When you have a manager, give him the tools to get it right and let him have a really good relationship with those in the back office to be able to continue to slowly progress. And they've built, exercised their stadium and rebuilt that ground in Bergamo really nicely, I should add, because it was just a big old bowl in the past, and now they've brought everybody closer to the pitch. It's a more intense atmosphere. So they've even done that well, of building a new modern-looking stadium in Bergamo. It's just a wonderful football story in general. Really, really quality. And the fact they're leading...
Also, what impresses me as well, Ollie, is that Atalanta win the Europa League last season. Biggest night in their history in terms of success, pretty much.
Yeah.
I know they've won a Coppa Italia before, but they win the Europa League, and Ademola Lookman scores the hat-trick in the final. And you'd think there'd be maybe a drop-off at the start of the next season. That would be like an understandable response. But to be top of Serie A, just had a look, something like 9 wins on the bounce across all competitions. And in the Champions League, they're in a great position. They take on Real Madrid at home. And probably for me, that's the pick of the games midweek, because Atalanta 1 win would basically mean that I need to stop using the word basically so much. That's what I noticed about myself listening back to this podcast. But if Atalanta win in midweek, they'll be on 14 points, so they're pretty much qualified for the last 8, in that top 8 of the Champions League. And they would also put Real Madrid in a very, very, very tricky position going into the final 2 games. So I think it's the pick of the midweek games in the Champions League. But yeah, I mean, to win the Europa League and then start the next season even stronger is quite some feat. Can they win Serie A?
Let's not start making discussions too much. I mean, that
would be massive, though.
That is a crowded top of the table right now. If you think that they're within 3 points, you've got Lazio, Fiorentina, Inter, Napoli, and Atalanta. The budgets are still there. Someone like Inter. I mean, even look at Fiorentina being in 4th place is a fantastic story. And if they stayed there, that would be unbelievable, considering where Fiorentina have been in the last few years. So for Atalanta to lift a Serie A title, to win the Scudetto, that's unprecedented territory. We're not talking like Leicester City, because it's been a slow, steady build. But I think I think you could argue, looking back at that, would be one of the strongest decades in world football that a club has had in terms of consistent growth. That's what every business is looking for, isn't it? Year-on-year growth. The Atalanta are doing Fortune 500.
But you've got to have the right man at the top. for a coach to have that kind of longevity at a football club, they've got to be the right fit on so many different levels. And there was an interesting debate about Tottenham and Daniel Levy, who's obviously done incredible things with Tottenham Football Club. I mean, new stadium's incredible, training ground, they've been intelligent, they haven't overspent, etc., etc. But it was something like in his tenure, the average length of a coach there is like one year, 4 months or something like that. And if you do that, I mean, how often does that work? Unless you're Chelsea, like that very, very rarely works, just chopping and changing the manager so frequently. So, but you've got to find the right fit there.
When's the time that you've ever read, and obviously you've covered Serie A intensely for a number of years as well, Dave. When was the last time you ever read a storyline about Gasperini, like that has been a negative, or him getting overly emotional or frustrated? And when was the last time you saw him on a touchline, like being absolutely apoplectic or irate? He is so level-headed. He's got that kind of old man, hey, I've seen everything. Like, this is just football, so I'm just going to trust myself. That self-belief and confidence that even when things aren't going too well, he's like, no, it's fine. We'll just come back. We'll keep going.
It's the quote, you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. Like, he's got that very stoic, philosophical man above the clouds looking down on his empire kind of vibe, which most coaches don't have because they're always 3 games away from getting the sack, whereas Gasperini knows he could lose 10 on the bounce and he's probably not going to lose his job. So.
Statue worthy, what he's done with Atalanta? You've got a new ground.
Yeah, I think after the Europa League, given what they've won historically in their history to win the Europa League, I think for sure. And obviously if they win the league, then absolutely so. And also just picking up someone like Ademola Lookman. I mean, how clever is that? Right, there's a few more football stories I want to rattle through very quickly, Ollie. I thought I'd finished talking about Botafogo, but I got a message this morning from a mate being like, hey, that Gregor.
I was going to bring this up. Yeah, Gregor, yeah.
I saw he scored at the weekend. So we just got to wrap up on Botafogo. A few weeks ago, we said it was like the biggest 2 weeks in the history. To be 3 points behind in the title race, go to your nearest rivals and win. Then play a Libertadores final, South America's Champions League. Have a man sent off in the first minute, Gregor, and then go on to win it. And then win your final 2 league games of the season. And in the final minute of your final league game, the fella who was sent off in the first minute of the Libertadores final scores the winner and you win the league. There will never be another 2 week spell like that in Botafogo's history. And imagine, Ollie, you're a fan. There will be a cluster of Botafogo fans that went to all 4 of those games. Mm-hmm. Away at Palmeiras, away in the Libertadores final, away at Inter and Porto Alegre, and then home against Sao Paulo final day of the season. What a fucking finish to the season for Botafogo.
I tell you what, it's scuppered Martin Tyler's "You will never see anything like this" line from the Aguero. That's as close as it comes to repeating what City did. And Aguero wasn't sent off in the other biggest game of the season in Botafogo's history after 2 minutes either. So this is a real kind of like return of the prodigal son from being the most evil man on the planet for Botafogo fans to suddenly being their absolute hero. And yeah, it was awesome. I was looking through kind of football news and social media last night and saw this goal and was like, that's an incredible story. It's up there.
And Ollie, also, it was not difficult to nail this as a director, but the shots after the goal went in are literally 5 different people crying. You know, they were not even celebrating. The camera just obviously holds on the goal scorer for 10 seconds and then knows that the story really is the fans. Bang, someone crying. Bang, someone crying. All different kinds of people. And everyone's just in tears in the ground. Because if you're a Botafogo fan, that is something else.
Yeah, it's relief, isn't it? It's relief and tears rather than anything else. But also it's the fact, like, South American directors have this tendency to the ball, even before it hits the back of the net, they hard cut to something really quickly. And they don't. What they do is they just focus on the player with his elation, almost as if they're waiting for that emotion to come out of the stands. So it's like, wait. First one's crying, boom, go. And it'd be, I'd love to know the conversation in that truck, getting nerdiness into like the football production side of it, but like of the director saying, right, camera 4, give me this. Or if camera 4 was already just focused on some fans, because they're so late in the game anyway, it's like, well, when the full-time whistle blows, I want them with their sadness of drawing and perhaps not winning the league title, etc. Instead, it's like, boom, no, got that. Yeah, wonderfully shot, wonderfully worked. And yeah, I mean, like, as I say, it's up there, I think you could argue, with the City late winner from Aguero. It's not quite as good, perhaps, but it's close. It's about as close as you'll find. And if you add the Libertadores into it and then the individual story of Gregor, I mean, that might tip it over the edge to be level pegging with it. Sorry, Tyler.
Well,
sorry, mate.
Hopefully we'll talk about Botafogo again in a few months' time. Ollie, couple other football stories. Tonight, West Ham against Wolves, and it's called El Sáquico. Is that funny? Is that good? I quite like it. It's quite clever, isn't it?
Yeah.
El Sáquico?
It doesn't quite work.
No, but that's the beauty of it. Because it's... Obviously, it's El Clásico.
If your mate was down the pub, he'd say that, and everyone would go, yeah, see what you tried to do there.
It doesn't work, actually. It doesn't work orally. It only works in written form, that.
So I think it's a hard sell for a great one. But then that, as you say, that might be the English humour of, it's bad, it's so bad, it's kind of good. Yeah, all right, yeah.
And obviously one of them is going to get sacked. I mean, how Lopetegui's still got his job, I don't know. Also, they obviously are going to sack him, the West Ham boss. So what's the point in giving him this game against Wolves?
Yeah.
Is it because if he wins 5-0, then he gets another game? But if he loses that, he will get sacked. So yeah, I don't really get it.
I never understand that point as kind of going on that. You've got one more game to sort it. If you've got to the point where there's one more game to sort it, you probably aren't going to sort it.
You're not the man.
Because if you find the victory, you're prolonging the inevitable because whatever they're doing is still not sorting it. But then again, I don't know. I like football clubs that trust in managers a little bit more and say, okay, you've got an idea. Let's let it play out for 18 months, 2 years, as opposed to going, shit, we need to get rid of this quickly. But then the stakes are too high in terms of being relegated potentially from the Premier League and stuff like that, particularly if you're West Ham with that big stadium that will never get filled in the Championship at all. It'd be very tough, but... Yeah.
Two more football stories I want to rattle through, and they're kind of interlinked. Gary Neville and Dan Ashworth leaving Man United. I mean, Ollie, if you're Ruben Amorim, do you think there's been a moment over the last week or 10 days that he thought, fuck, what have I done here? Why have I gone to Man United? I mean, the state of that squad, which is rotten in so many ways, must have surprised him. It must have surprised him. And then... Dan Ashworth leaving as sporting director when they spent like 2 million trying to get him in from Newcastle. He's only been there 2 minutes, and then Dan Ashworth's been sacked. And you're Ruben Amorim. Obviously, when you were brought in, you would have a main part of your conversation would have been, right, who's my sporting director? Who am I working with? And that person's gone within 3 weeks of you joining. I don't know. I thought it was odd that Ruben Amorim joined. Obviously, Ruben Amorim's a very intelligent man, and the people around him are intelligent. He's thought all this through from top to tail. I understand all that, but I just think, I don't know. I'm sure there was a moment, because life isn't binary, so I'm sure there was a moment this week where he did think, shit, I shouldn't have left Sporting. Even if it was just a flicker, even if it was just a moment, there must have been a moment where he thought, I've made a mistake here.
Well, with Sporting, he's beaten City. I don't think his United side will beat City, even with City struggling at the moment. That's a great comparison for where Ruben Amorim was and where he finds himself. And we said it with Ten Hag. Like, that is a sinking ship at the moment with United that's all over the place. And people are, running out of the kitchen, throwing things overboard, trying to scramble away with whatever they can leave with. And then United are trying to find a new captain as it's after the Titanic's hit the iceberg and it's already going down. And Ten Hag's been thrown off the ship for being an idiot for driving them into the iceberg, even when it probably wasn't him at the tiller when he moved when the iceberg struck. And now you're going, right, Ruben, come on, save this. All right, what have I got to work with? We got a load of players that are very disinterested right now and disheartened, I imagine, with the whole club, not just the departing manager who's just gone. And you've got an absolute mess in terms of stability and structure across the board at that football club. And we said it before, and we said that Amorim might get there and realise that this is a bit of a fucked up situation for Manchester United, to put it bluntly. And I think that's come to fruition very quickly. And I think he has probably looked at the last 2 games and the inability to deal with set pieces and gone, there is a lot to do on the pitch. And with all the instability off the pitch, how difficult is it to instill a confidence level into footballers that let's face it, like footballers do seem more fragile. They don't like the harsh manager coming in and throwing about the place. People like Sir Alex Ferguson just don't, and his old style wouldn't work in modern day football. So how do you tell a group of players that have got a lot of player power, got a lot of money, and seem disinterested with the club? How do you tell them and rally them to up their game on the simplest of things, like defending a set
and
piece?
It's got to be a clear out as well. I mean, I know it'll sting if you're part of that Man United hierarchy to be told that most of your players are nowhere near good enough,
but how,
and don't have the right mentality. I mean, that is going to stick. That is a big job, considering the amount of money they've already spent the last decade since Ferguson left. That is a lot to sort out. The ego on Ruben Amorim, Ollie. The only thing I can think is that he's thought, I am the only man that can fix this football club, and this is my calling. That's the only reason he would have gone. Yeah, money, fine. But I mean, he would, he would have earned money at Sporting, he would have earned money at whatever next club he went to. Well, weird one for me.
Yeah, maybe it's just naivety, thinking that he'd be given
Is someone that talented? Ollie must have an agent, his coaching staff, his wife. I mean, he's got so many people around him.
Yeah,
Someone around him would have said, "Don't do this." 100%. Whether it's his assistant or his agent or whatever, someone would have said, "Don't." His agent wouldn't have done, because obviously it's a big wage and agent's getting a cut. But yeah,
but there's maybe it is ego rather than naivety, because so there's been some really interesting stuff. Obviously, kind of parallel to this, GMs in American football have a lot of control over like who comes in from the draft and stuff like that, and they do a lot of behind the scenes documentaries. All the football ones that we've had in the last few years with Tottenham and City, etc., and Arsenal, they all stem from the behind the scenes docs that have taken place previously in American football. And the New York Giants had a documentary of their off season. So before pre-season begins, before the regular season, you have the off season, which is like the draft, free agency, and it was like a behind the scenes doc on how you build this team, basically, with like cameras in all the rooms of the GM and the owner and all that kind of stuff, listening in on all the conversations. The Giants lost one of their biggest players, Saquon Barkley, because they weren't willing to pay him money, and there was this idea of like, we're not going to do that. You go and test free agency, and when you don't get the money that you think you want, you come back to us. And he ended up going to the biggest rivals, Philadelphia, and he's just sent the franchise record for rushing for the Philadelphia Eagles this year. He's had an unbelievable year so far, and we've still got 4 games to play. So there were all this footage now coming out of the GM being like, man, he's not going to go to Philadelphia. Nah, they're not going to come up with the money to pay him all this. And there is that. It could be ego, but I do think there is a naivety still at every single level, potentially, for underestimating how other people react. And it's now doing the rounds across social media, all these clips, because it makes the guy in hindsight look like an absolute fool and one of the worst GMs in recognising the problematic situation that the Giants found themselves in with this great player. So I do think there could be a level of naivety if Amorim's there and he's like, no, but I can do this. I can sort this out. United approach you. They're not going to go, we're a fucking dumpster fire right now, Ruben. We haven't got hope in hell. Like, we need you to come and save us. And look, we're a prestigious club. We have this huge financial backing from our monetary turnover.
We've got this great sporting director you're going to love working with.
Yeah. You're going to love him for a couple of weeks. It's going to be great.
Let me wrap up on the football by just saying, Gary Neville, I mean, that man's financial and business hustle is absolutely insane, Ollie. So this week, I don't know what his contract is with Sky, but he was in America working for NBC this weekend, covering the Premier League. And Ollie, he just looks so knackered. And I know that I think NBC and Sky, by the way, are owned by the same corporate branch, so there must be an agreement there. But I just thought, man, you work so much on so many different outlets. And I watched him on that NBC show for like 10 minutes and just thought, you look bloody knackered, mate. And I know he's flying first class and everything like that. But I mean, that's a man in his 50s that's, I mean, he works so much for so many different outlets. And it's absolute oversaturation. There's no doubt about that. At the point where, like, why is he absolutely everywhere? But what can you say? I mean, he's obviously...
Well, he's got that...
I just respect that. I mean, how many podcasts does he have?
I was going to say, he's got the podcast with Carragher, Ian Wright, Roy Keane.
And now an American version of that, by the way, as well.
And then he's got one with Rebecca Lowe and the 2 Robbies, Musto and Earl.
Yeah. I like the 2 Robbies, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, the NBC coverage is really good. It's probably better than a lot of the stuff that we get in the UK. It's less hyperbolic. But it's so interesting to see how Carragher and Neville have slid across to join the US ranks as well. Probably because they recognise there's so much more money to be had out there as well. You know,
I mean,
Robbie Earle and Robbie Mustoe, to their credit, and Robbie Earle is a lovely man. I've sat down and had some beers with him, and he was super useful when I was doing my university course. I made a documentary radio doc about like the rise of soccer in the US and everything, and he was happy to be interviewed by some specky little uni kid doing it. So they're great blokes, but the weight of the name, like if you're Gary Neville and Carragher, you look across at that and go, we got to get in at NBC because we're bigger names in Premier League history. We're now probably bigger names in media, particularly with Carragher now doing all the CBS Champions League stuff and getting a name for himself alongside Omri and Micah Richards as the Banter Kings. And then Robbie and Robbie, like they're established great names in the US broadcasting circles, but I'm Gary Neville. Robbie Mustoe and Robbie Earle didn't win a Champions League.
But how annoying if you've been working on American networks for years and all of a sudden fucking Neville and Carragher come across and you'd be like, lads, like you fucking front Sky's football, you're the two main guys on Sky, like what are you doing over here? Why are you taking it? And there's no such thing as my gig, but I mean, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like go.
And also like names, we were discussing this in the office this week. I work with a load of co-commentators that are so much better than the big names that you get on TV. Because they put in more work. And I'm not saying Neville and Carragher don't put in work. I'm sure they do. And Carragher obviously practiced drinking and doing post-match interviews when he went to Dortmund. I'm sure he's done a few mock runs at home and stuff like that.
I mean, he's one of the most knowledgeable pundits, I think, Carragher, in terms of sheer information retention.
Yeah.
And, to Gary Neville's defence, I do think he's very good at articulating certain things. But we don't need all of them. We don't need both of them everywhere all the time.
Yeah,
and neither are flawless. I mean, Gary Neville, a big socialist, but also fucking loves money and what I don't know. Like it's an interesting one.
But it's just the idea of like you can have other opinions and other voices. You don't need to have the same people over and over again. And there are lots of people that maybe didn't play at big clubs and aren't huge names. Like there are a lot of Robbie and Robbies in the UK that don't have the same profile as Robbie and Robbie, but can do as good a job as them at breaking down a game, or even more than, and probably deserve more gigs perhaps than a Neville and Carragher when they hoover up every single gig going. Like I said, I think Gary Neville was, especially early on, the best co-commentator in football, aside from the over the top of a...
It's got so partisan now as well. They did like a watch-along recently, which I've never understood this concept anyway. You watch other people watching football and their like crazy reactions, which are obviously not authentic because they know they're on camera. So I've never really understood that concept of content anyway. But that's because I'm a fucking 38-year-old man, Ollie, and not a child. So there's probably that. But, we're watching like Carragher and Neville on the sofa watching a game. And obviously because of the Liverpool Man United allegiances, which everyone knows about, it's not a secret. But do I need to see them jumping over each other because someone scored a goal? I mean, it's only December and Gary Neville's celebrating the Newcastle equaliser like Man United just won the title because Liverpool were dropping points. I don't know, it's all a bit like, we get that you have allegiance to certain football clubs, but I don't really get that. Like, can we not keep some kind of mirage of neutrality here?
Yeah, neutrality should be the name of the game. Like, it shouldn't be done in a partisan way. We don't need a player from each club, for instance, on a co-commentary. Like when you do get that with Neville and Carragher on the Man U Liverpool game, and you've got three voices plus the referee every so often, the former referee coming on as well. It's like it's four voices on the actual commentary, let alone then the six pundits and two studios you've got set. It's just
too
a lot.
Much.
Yeah, it's just a lot.
It is too much. Mr. Ollie Wilson, my battery is on 10%. You're about to hit the golf course, so maybe you could pick a non-football story to run with in the Ollie Wilson monologue minute that we all love, and that I can try and react to. What's caught your eye in the world of sport this week?
Well, we've got Lewis Hamilton with his last race at Mercedes this weekend. Has an absolute botched job in the final race of the F1 World Championship in Abu Dhabi. Qualifies 16th, knocked out in the first round of qualifying, which is such a disheartening way for him to finish off his final Saturday at Mercedes, and then gets his way all the way back up to fourth to finish the race, his final drive before he goes to Ferrari next year, which is going to be really weird seeing Lewis Hamilton obviously in all red. It's going to be quite iconic to see, this icon of Formula One now with the iconic team of motorsport and probably just cars in general. Everybody knows Ferrari. Everybody knows Ferrari red, and Hamilton will be there. But it's still the cattiness between George Russell and Max Verstappen that has hogged the headlines for a large part of this weekend until McLaren won their first constructors title since 1998, thanks to Lando Norris's victory in Abu Dhabi this weekend. I think it's the first time in 30 years that the winning driver hasn't also been part of the winning constructor in terms of the World Championships in Formula One. So congratulations to McLaren on that. But as I say, George Russell and Max Verstappen, just constant jibing. As we touched on last week, this kind of started from Russell throwing Verstappen under the bus in terms of an indiscretion in qualifying that got Verstappen taken off for the top spot of the grid going into last weekend's race in Qatar. And this weekend, the jibing has just continued all week. And both are saying how much respect they've lost for each other. Both have said some rather disrespectful comments to each other. And it's been going back and forth to the point that there is a driver's meal at the end of the Formula One season. And
Hamilton hosts it? Or not?
I don't think he hosts it. It's done as we're all going to go out and have this. And, you know, at the end of it's very weird, Formula One, because they're all very much like, we're all drivers. We all respect each other, like, off the track. As soon as they get on the track, they're just horrible fuckers to each other, like fighting, screaming, kicking. What a bellend, how'd he do this to me? All this kind of stuff. So I don't know how that doesn't bleed into your life off the track when you have somebody nearly kill you on the track, kind of thing. And Lando Norris posts a picture of everybody together and just signs it off with, and as you were thinking, the two who you're thinking of had to be at opposite ends of the table. Because this is turned.
But they were there.
Yeah, they both.
Everyone went.
Everybody was there.
Okay.
But Russell and Verstappen are at opposite ends of the table, apparently. And it's kind of annoying because I'd have liked this in the middle of the season when everything was getting very heated between Norris and Verstappen in terms of a potential title race. And if you had George Russell suddenly coming in and having a go off track at Max Verstappen and they suddenly start getting fighty, and that perhaps interferes with their focus on a Grand Prix race. If they're alongside each other going into a corner, neither's suddenly going to pull out and all that kind of stuff. It could have made it such a wild ride this season. And it's only going to continue going through the off-season because they're both surely going to be sat there just stewing over all of these comments the last 7 days or so. I think it's a wonderful storyline of, like, these two seem to really, really dislike each other now. An actual hatred and dislike between athletes in sport when everybody's now so pally-pally on Instagram is something to be really enjoyed.
Yeah. And something to be nurtured as well. And I think also it transcends the sport, right? So it's when the F1 articles on your BBC Sport page just nudge up slightly higher. They're not tucked away in the F1 section. They're just going up there slightly because everyone loves that bit of needle between two drivers. I was just looking at Lewis Hamilton, Ollie. I didn't realise he was 39.
Yeah.
So as an F1 driver, let's say he's going to Ferrari now, like, how, in terms of age, he's past his peak, I would have thought. It's sort of, if we're going by like mid-30s being your peak, even because F1 as a driver is incredibly physically demanding. So in your 40s, is he gonna struggle to do what he did
depends
previously?
really, because obviously fitness and conditioning is improving so much. So we're seeing athletes going on for longer and longer in every single sport across the board, right? Rocket Santa Cruz.
And he's pretty clean living as well, I think, Hamilton.
Very much so. And you look at Fernando Alonso, who's older than Lewis Hamilton. He's still on the grid. And we have had drives from Alonso in the last couple of years where you've said that is as good a drive as Alonso has had in his career. It's just he doesn't have a dominant car to be able to compete consistently at the top end of the track. So Ferrari build a competent enough car. I mean, Lewis Hamilton had this fantastic overtake on George Russell on the weekend, where he goes around the outside of a corner, breakneck speed, and just gets his nose in front for the right-hand turn coming up, so he's then got the inside line. But like that was one of the most impressive overtakes that we've seen, definitely over the weekend and maybe in the second half of the season. And it shows that he's still got the guts, he's still got the ability to race wheel to wheel. So if the fitness can maintain, there's no reason why he shouldn't, if Ferrari give him the right car, be able to compete at that top end of the field. I don't think we're going to see a Lewis Hamilton dropping off. I think we're going to see a Lewis Hamilton going, right, I've got 1-2 years maybe at a shot at finally beating Michael Schumacher's 7 World Championships crown. And if it's going to happen, it's got to happen now. And he's 100% desperate for that. Because
how many's he got?
7.
So they both got 7. He's level with Schumacher.
Yeah, they're level. Yeah. So he wants number 8. And some would argue that he should have had it.
It's a great one going into 2025, isn't it? It's kind of similar to Novak Djokovic and his slams, where he's got 25, and Margaret Court also had 25. So it's the most successful men's player of all time, but he's still leveled Margaret Court back in the day of 25. Just on Hamilton, I like this quote about leaving Mercedes and going to Ferrari. He said, it's like a relationship that you've told whoever the counterpart is that you're leaving, but you're living together for a year. And I remember I was reading that thinking, Jesus, that comes from a real world situation from him. He doesn't just pluck that analogy out the
I had a friend that had that as well for 6 months, and it's not a pretty position when they had a house together and they were still, having to live with each other after it had gone. That was, So I understand that. I don't necessarily think it's quite like that, because with Lewis Hamilton, he's won 6 world titles with this team and owes Mercedes so much, which is why I was getting so frustrated with this, let's just bin the car last week in Qatar, when he was getting annoyed at the lack of performance he was getting out of it and the number of penalties that were cropping up. It's like, well, the penalties are driver error, so that's on you, Lewis. And if you're saying bin the car when there's a responsibility to keep driving, keep the sponsors happy, etc., then kind of do your job at the end of the day. Stop throwing the bottle out the pram, toys out the pram, and get on with actually being the racing driver that you're meant to be, because it'd be really sad for you off the back end of this career with Mercedes to let down the team. And in fairness to him, he had an excellent race this weekend, and going from 16th to 4th is one of those kind of classic Lewis Hamilton, back against the wall, the adversity, a bit like in Brazil in 2021, and then he comes out fighting and gets himself almost a podium position. And it's a great way to sign off. It's just going to be interesting now with George Russell quite clearly going to be the new big dog at Mercedes, and he's already fighting off the track with Max Verstappen. If Mercedes get into a title race and can improve their car in this final year of regulations before it changes again in 2026, you're going to have McLaren, Red Bull, Hamilton and a Ferrari, and then Russell and Mercedes all competing. And the second half of the season shown that Red Bull are fragile without Adrian Newey. So I'm looking forward to 2025's Formula One calendar. It just needs to happen sooner rather than later. It's like, we've got to wait now till March. This is rubbish. It's like the previous seasons. It always just about gets good in these final few races of the year, and then we have to sit around for 4 months and wait for it to all kick off again. It's so frustrating.
Christmas with the family will take a little edge off, Ollie, so don't worry.